do have the live stream started on YouTube right now, just to make sure it was working before the meeting started.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan. We'll hold just a few more minutes. Did anybody hear from Chris Eng on if he was able to join us for this one?
I believe he was going to make an attempt to join tonight, last I talked to him.
Okay. Looks like we've got Finn joining. We'll hold on until he's able to join us with some audio, and then we'll get started. Hi, Finn. His sound's not quite working yet. Let's go ahead and get started. May have a few others joining us here, but it's a little after 5:30 and we do have a quorum. So with that, it looks like we've got Blake joining us as well, connecting to audio. So with that, I'll call our workshop to order this evening. We'll note that we are in workshop format tonight. And so we won't be taking any official action. It tended to be just a working session of the EDA. Karen, could you note, instead of doing voice roll call, can you just note roll call for the minutes? And with that, I will invite you all to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance if you want to cut your camera for that. And then if you want to put up the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members of the EDA, you have an agenda before you. And again, we are in workshop session this evening, intended to be an informal working session. And I know our last meeting and the updates that we provided at the end of the meeting got compressed, certainly around the conversation of the city's response to COVID and some of the programs that we had been rolling out, in particular to restaurants and bars around food and liquor service. And so I wanted to start this evening with a continuation of that conversation. It's in the agenda as specific around food and liquor service, but if there are broader questions around overall COVID response, happy to talk about that as well. But wanted to, again, recognize that our conversation last meeting got very compressed, and I think there may be both some feedback and then also some thoughts on other things that the city might be doing. So to tee up this conversation, I know Karen was going to give an update of the program that was rolled out, and we'll start there. But again, happy to entertain conversations, questions, or any parts of conversation related to city's overall support to businesses during COVID. So we'll turn it over to Karen. And Karen, you're on mute.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
President Bain and EDA members. So in the packet, I included a list of businesses that have participated or responded back to the city in terms of expanding, either putting the outdoor service or expanding what they already have. And part of what that included was an application that we asked businesses to fill out. The businesses that received this application directly in the mail were those that already have an active liquor license. Those are the ones that are required to get a license with the city. All other business in terms of restaurant, that doesn't fall under city licensing. And so the ones that got the application direct were ones that already have that liquor license. We had, you can see on the list, there are, I don't know, 10 at least that responded, returned the application. That's also included in your packet. And it was just a quick 2-page. And the emergency management director, Captain Weiss, took a look at these as they came in. So I would receive them, forward them to Captain Weiss and Fire Chief Al Newman right away. They would review those, and our turnaround on this was usually less than a day to get the approval and get back to the applicant to let them know, your plan looks good. It meets all the safety standards, which was our biggest concern. If they were going out into the right of way, or if they were going to be putting up a tent, that it met fire code standards. And so our turnaround was very, very rapid on this, less than a day, like I said. And I think, so far, everybody that turned in an application, we got them approved, we got them turned around and going, and we haven't really had any, at least on my end, no issues or problems or people having an issue with having to fill this out. The nice thing about the application is it also highlighted what the governor's orders are on there in terms of what the requirements, what outdoor businesses for food and alcohol service, what they can do. So it provided brief information for them. And so I don't think I received any this towards the end of last week. And I haven't received any today. So I think probably everybody who turned these, that got these, turned them in. So I'm happy to answer any questions about this whole process.
Just to follow up, as we know on this week, the governor's also going to allow the restaurants to open at a reduced capacity. So that may change some of the outdoor dining, but we've talked a little bit internally about allowing those outside spaces to remain past the opening of the internal spaces to try to expand their capacity and try to help them make up for some of the patronage that they've lost in the last few months. So it's our hope that for the most part, we can continue the outdoor spaces sometime into the fall, yet undetermined, but probably at least through the end of September, I would expect.
I sure want to thank the staff for all they did getting this expedited and keeping it moving. It was very, very important, and I really appreciate it from a businessman's point of view. Thank you.
I guess I'd ask members of the EDA if there was feedback either on initial rollout, communications, things that went okay, things we maybe could have done better. And then also if you're hearing any current feedback now that we're a couple of weeks into this, or actually only a week into this, but my concept of time anyway has been a little wonky the last couple of months. Now that we're a week into that, if there's any other feedback on what else we can be doing, and I guess I'm interested in any feedback that you may have.
I have not heard myself.
Nan, are you hearing any feedback from members? Either initial feedback or feedback now that we're into it?
Yes. I was unmuting. Yes, initially I did. I had a couple of calls from restaurants that, and I think they have situations where they didn't really need to expand um, into like roadway areas or anything like that. But yeah, initially had some feedback that was less than positive.
And was that, what was that? Was it, do you think it was miscommunication? Was it a communication error on our part, or was it a process, or what else, what could we have done better, kind of just Monday morning quarterbacking this?
Yeah, I think it was just more from the way it was communicated. I think, I mean, that's what I took from it, that, oh my gosh, now they're just throwing something else at us on top of everything else. That would, do they really care? They're making it more difficult. We already have enough on our plate, that kind of thing. I haven't heard anything.
Now that we're through that, do you think the kind of the spirit and the intent has kind of come through of this is intended to be a loosening of restrictions to allow for things, or are we still missing the mark?
I think with all that happened last week, it just kind of dissipated. That was, like I said, it was the day after. And so it was right away initial. And then, then we had rioting and mayhem, and I haven't heard a thing. So I think it's okay. You know what I'm saying? Some people just, their gut reaction, is that way. So I haven't actually addressed it with those that have reached out to me about it. Partly because same thing, I got consumed with riding and marching and all the things. So
yeah, we're in a tough cycle where last week's issue was last week's issue, and now we're all focused on this week's issue and all have our hands full with that. So, well, I guess in terms of,
if I could just add a little bit to that, I think it was just, it was maybe just a little confusion, and not really on the city's part. After talking with you a little bit, Mara, on the side, and it sounds as though that and you guys were out, the city was out in front of it, and that was great. I think it was just more confusion. That's all with with the governor's restrictions, not so much the city. So the city, we're kind of on the front line of it. So end up being somewhat the
right.
one that voice concerns or their issues with. So the fortunate thing is they're going to open up the inside here on Wednesday for a lot of these people, and so that issue is come and gone, I guess. But I think it was just more frustration, and maybe the complaints that maybe Nan got, or if anyone that kind of pulled me aside, it was just they wanted to vent, and it really wasn't ultimately the city's fault on it.
right.
If it's helpful.
Well,
And I think it sounds like it's kind of past and people have moved on. If it's necessary or helpful, I'd be more than willing to reach out to those businesses to smooth anything over. I don't know if that's necessary at this point, but if it's helpful, I'd be more than willing to do that. All you'd need to do really is just pass their names on to me, and I can give them a call.
Okay.
Karen, I'll definitely let you know. I don't have a sense that that's needed at this time, but if it should arise again, I'll definitely offer you up as a solution.
Yep.
I think also on a go forward basis, yes, we are a lot, they're able to open up some to a limited capacity inside, but certainly I think we're not at the end of this, this evolving, new operating restrictions and trying to provide some assistance. And so certainly EDA members, please continue to reach out as you're hearing feedback. Because, as Pat mentioned, we're, likely in some sort of at least amended serving capacity for the duration of the summer, potentially. And if we're going to extend the patio areas for the long term, let's make sure we're continuing to hit the mark. So provide the feedback and we'll adjust. So appreciate the feedback.
I will make a comment, and Dan was on our call today on our Zoom meeting with the businesses. We had quite a good, it was quite well attended, and we had some of the other restaurants, and there was lots of positive from the expansion of patio services. So today, and Blake was on as well, and we heard lots of great comments from those restaurant owners that were on the call, as far as how that's all going, and it was all very positive.
That's great. That's good. Anything else related to, specific to the food service, liquor service update? Maybe let's then expand into a little bit of the broader COVID response. Just to recap some of the significant things that we've talked about. It's more of an administrative action at this point, but we will be circling back on, the council will be circling back to address reduction of liquor license fees for this period of time where they were compressed. That's kind of an administrative step that still has to happen. That we are still on target for bringing that to council. The city, Dan continues to update the COVID response page, and certainly, keeping track of updated governor's orders is an evolving process, and doing whatever we can to stay up to date. NAN's continuing to have and the chamber's continuing to have the business response calls and still participating in that. This is an evolving situation. So as we need to evolve how we're addressing, want to keep those lines of communication open, and we're open to doing more, taking more action if needed. I think that some of the conversation we're going to have here talking about the BR&E program is a natural extension of the COVID response. And we'll kind of ease into that here in a couple of discussion items down. But just before we move on, wanted to see if there was anything else that was on folks' minds, feedback you're hearing, things we need to get on radar.
The only thing.
Go ahead.
Right.
Go ahead, Finn.
Go ahead.
Is it still the 10th that the state is recognizing indoor dining with certain restrictions?
Starting today.
Starting today. Okay,
Wednesday.
Wednesday? Is it on the 10th?
10th is my understanding. I was just curious.
It's Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Okay, that was it. I'm joined late. I'm here finally. Technical difficulties.
Howdy, Finn.
Well, the only question I had is I noticed in that application that there was a night, this was good for 90 days from application date. And if we're going to extend that outdoor seating, into the fall and let the weather dictate kind of the end of the season, what's that look like for these businesses to reapply, or does that just get grandfathered out, or what does that look like?
Well, actually, with the 90 days, we're really close to the end of September. I think that we have to judge whether we want to go further with that or not. October skies get a little bit dicey, so we'll at least contact the current holders and let them know that they can do this through, if they wish, through the end of September, and then as we go along, try to reevaluate that. I mean, some of the weather will dictate if they stay out or not.
Right, for sure.
Patrick, if things are going well overall, can we allow that to automatically renew if we extend? I'd like to avoid a reapplication if necessary. Do we have an ability to do that?
Oh, absolutely. This is an administrative process anyways. We approved it internally. There's no reason we can't. If someone says I'm going till the end of December, that we couldn't let them do at the end of December. So yeah, it's not an issue. What we have to, in the long run, be careful of is we have a lot of different zoning issues and health issues that we have to be careful of, but with the emergency orders in place, we have the authority to do some of this administratively and let it happen, and not pay much attention to some of the zoning laws and other laws that we have to at this point. So we have to, sooner or later, we have to judge that versus what's coming out of the governor's office and the state capitol regarding our guidance on this issue.
Good question. Any other questions, comments on this topic? All right. Not hearing any, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is an update of the work plan status report. I know Dan had kind of included in the packet a detailed update. Do you want to kind of walk us through a couple of key points?
Yeah, absolutely. President, members of the EDA, just kind of going through just a quick high level update on the work plan. I think what you'll see as we kind of go through this, that there is definitely kind of a marked impact due to COVID on the work plan right now. But I think as we look at this long term, I still think this work plan is still valid moving forward. I just think it's sort of right now, it's just kind of a good idea to check in on these projects to see sort of which ones were completed, which ones are kind of in a holding pattern, and kind of, you know, what are the next steps for the work plan. In the packet, this is actually all found on page 9. So the updates start on page 9, and I'll just kind of go through these fairly quickly. If anybody has specific questions on them, feel free to raise your hand, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that are there. So kind of starting out here with goal 1. If you remember, goal 1 is to support marketing efforts for the city of Forest Lake to promote both the community's assets and the local business community. One of the action steps here was the creation of a convention and visitors bureau. And if you recall, back in March, we kind of had that initial presentation on the CVB. It was sort of that initial, let's get that ball rolling. However, right after that meeting, that is when COVID really took off and the pandemic hit. So that has actually been placed on hold due to COVID. So we'll look at that as stuff starts to open back up. We'll look at bringing that back onto the work plan at a future date. This next one is sort of what you'll kind of see here is in terms of like themes, in terms of speaking at events, going to trade shows, that type of stuff. Right now in the industry, nobody really knows what that's going to look like in 6 months or a year. A lot of these trade shows have moved into either a virtual setting, or they're not holding them in person right now, or they're just postponing them indefinitely at this point. So a lot of the efforts that we were launching at the beginning of the year, kind of focusing on trade shows, getting trade show materials developed, that's all being recommended to be placed on hold right now. Wanting to make sure that when we do develop our trade show materials, that we're using current pictures, current data, and we don't really have an end date as to when these are a starting date to when trade shows are really going to come back online. So here, continue to speaking at Minnesota real estate and MCAR events to promote and market the city. One transition here is while they're not doing it in person, we are continuing to look for abilities to try to speak on a virtual setting. I haven't found what that opportunity yet, but I'm still monitoring the email chains, looking for if they're calling out for speakers to present in a virtual setting, trying to get our name out there that way. So this is one that kind of has transitioned as a result of COVID. Downtown revitalization is goal number 2. Here again, the downtown committee was one of the main action items that was here. Here again, we were at the 1 yard line in terms of getting this launched, and then COVID hit. This was the first meeting that we actually canceled due to the COVID pandemic. So this has been placed on in a holding pattern. However, we are looking at bringing this back into more of an action item beginning in late July. We're hoping to re-engage that downtown committee in late July, the second EDA meeting in July. I have still been reaching out to consultants for downtown planning as much as I can over this the past couple months here. So we are going to get the short list of consultants. They are developing bids in terms of what their planning process would look like. I don't have those in to date, but that actually there has been some work on the back end of that downtown planning since COVID has hit. The downtown incentive program, we have not received any applications in 2020. So that actually has been fairly quiet this first half of 2020. The downtown infrastructure study, the modeling has been completed. They're just finalizing the modeling of the sewer shed at this point, and that's going to be presented at an upcoming meeting. So that one is nearing completion, so look for that to appear on an upcoming meeting. Actively market and promote the city-owned land to attract new commercial development within the city. This one, the first action step here, which is evaluate the listing agreement and market position for the publicly owned parcels within the airport or within the city's business park. A lot of that work had been placed on hold due to COVID. Had to kind of pivot to more of a response position. So I've not been active in following through on that one recently. Continue to support the efforts of the technology corridor and actively market the Headwaters 123 as a premier property within the corridor. If you recall at the last meeting, I presented an update from CBRE just on some of their marketing efforts that they've been doing. This property is continually being actively marketed by CBRE. And we are also going through the rezoning process right now on the Planning Commission side to allow for data center use to be an allowable use of the property. This was one area where we did some pointing exercises on the property, was one where we ended up leaving some points on the table. So by rezoning it, the property will be better positioned in the marketplace. Again, this last action step here is attend real estate and trade development shows. No work has been completed on this. Again, trade show booths are on hold until we kind of have a clearer picture as to when in-person trade shows will return. So we have parked this one at this point just because there's a pretty uncertain future as to when trade shows are going to come back online. Support workforce development. So action step here is support the efforts of the Forest Lake School District's Career Launch Program. I have been in contact with my contact at the Forest Lake High School for the Career Launch Program. They were teed up to present at I believe it was a first meeting in April, EDA meeting. I put them on hold just until I kind of get some of the COVID response kind of cleared. However, they are they're sort of in the same boat that we are. They just had a meeting, I believe it was a week ago, where it was kind of a status update meeting for a lot of the businesses that are participating in the Career Launch Program. I did participate in that meeting, so I'm continually participating in Career Launch meeting as they're hosted. And I will bring Mike from Career Launch in at a future EDA meeting. I just got to make sure everybody's schedule aligns for that to work out. Action step number 2 was to look at a data specific to the City of Forest Lake's workforce. We have not done any work on that particular item. Working with local businesses whenever possible to learn about their challenges in finding and retaining talent, and then help them make connections with workforce development and training. In terms of what's happened here, we sort of had to pivot this one a little bit. And Nan from the Chamber has done a great job in getting a weekly Chamber of Commerce business calls established as a result of COVID-19. A subcommittee of the EDA has attended those meetings and continues to attend those meetings as they're hosted. I also try to attend as many as I can. So that one was one that slightly pivoted as a result of COVID-19, but we are still making progress on that point at this time. On the identifying barriers to development and redevelopment within the city and look for proactive solutions to reduce or eliminate these barriers, which is goal number 5. The first action step, which is identifying infrastructure along the Highway 61 corridor. Look for aesthetic improvement in terms of maintenance of light poles, telephone poles, and develop an estimate for the required work. This one we looked at having the deliverable due in the first quarter of 2021. Due to that, we have not done any work on that one, but we'll reevaluate that one later in 2020. I missed one in here, but meet with Open to Business in the first quarter of 2020. If you recall back, I believe it was in February, Open to Business Tyler from Open to Business came and gave a presentation back when we were able to meet in person and actually provided the EDA an update on what Open to Business does, what they're currently doing. So that action step has been completed. We also looked at performing a policy review of tax abatement, the business subsidy and TIF programs, and update our current policies as needed. Just due to time constraints, no work has been completed on this item at this point. This last one here is the support of the revolving loan fund that Washington County was looking at establishing. I believe it was in 2021. This is one where I talked to Chris Eng about sort of where is Washington County with this due to COVID, and what they've sort of done. And they've kind of put a lot of their future policy development on hold at this point. They're really wanting to make sure that they're maintaining their budget to allow for the required bond payment on the publicly owned multifamily properties, and then have sufficient coverage for all existing agency obligations. They are going to be reevaluating where they are from a budget perspective to see if the revolving loan program is something they can bring forward at a future date. But just due to them kind of putting it on hold, I mean, we're acting in a supporting role to this one. I've also put this project on hold at this point until Washington County can provide a little bit clear guidance or has a better understanding of where they're going to be with their establishment of a revolving loan fund program. I mean, pretty much the high level review of the work plan. I think if you look at it in total, some items we're able to continue on. There's some items that are sort of in a holding pattern. But I think in general, where we are with COVID, I still think this work plan is pretty solid looking forward at the 2-year work plan. I don't suggest any major changes at this point. If it's later in the year and we're still sort of in this, pretty significantly COVID induced, there's still a lot of impacts due to COVID. We may want to look at changing this up, changing a few items on there. But for right now, I still think this work plan is still valid for the remainder of 20 and into 21. With that, be happy to answer any questions on specific items or just look for feedback in general as to where we are with the work plan.
Is Mara speaking?
I put myself on mute, sorry. Thanks, Dan. Any questions for Dan on the work plan?
No, I certainly see how this Finn. I certainly see how everything's been in a hesitant situation for some time and an unknown situation in the future. I'm going to apprentice under Paul from LATV, and I'm going to start working with him on going to different businesses and creating those vignettes that are going to be used. I suppose that's my opportunity also to talk to generally businesses that are out there and begin part of that BR&E proposition where it could have been locally led by a lot of us volunteers or staff members doing the majority of the legwork. So I'm going to look at it for both of those reasons when I start going through with Paul. I think I can cover both of those. We'll see how that fits into whatever the scheme is when people are starting to move forward. The only other question I had was, I'm part of the Downtown Memorial group, and is it okay in the City Hall at this point in time to establish a meeting of odds are to be 10 people or less? There's some staff and some individuals. To have a meeting down in the city offices at this point in time, or is that still a catch?
We are still restricting in-person meetings for the most part. We hope to open that up a little bit later. Again, waiting for some more guidance, but right now we're still on a alternate day schedule here at City Hall. City Hall is open, but it depends on what day people are here and what kind of schedule we have. We can talk about it, certainly. It just depends how big the group is, really.
Okay, well, I might work through Jamie then from Parks, Lakes and Trails and see how it fits with her thinking, and then that can be, discussed with you folks and see if we can start to have meetings.
Okay.
Ben, if you want some help with a Zoom, if an in-person isn't possible, if you want some help with a Zoom meeting, we can facilitate that.
Okay, we have a bunch of old codgers in this game, so we'll see. I have enough trouble just joining you today.
And in person, I get it is better. So yeah.
You get to lay out a drawing in front of people and talk about the graphics, and it's a lot easier just to point to things. So I think we'll wait until the door opens and then we'll join in at that point.
And we'd appreciate that, yeah.
Other questions related to the status plan updates?
Well, I do have
I had a couple of, yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Just how the BR&E, that idea of moving forward with the studies, is that part of the idea of getting bids and quotes from various planners and working that out? Is it part of waiting for the flow, all the flow issues to be resolved so that we have that information? Should all this kind of follow in behind when we start talking about whether we as locals try and do all the legwork for the BRE, or we hire somebody to do it? Is that all timed together in your thinking?
I think, I mean, once I kind of go through the kind of the expanded program, the presentation there on the BRE, I think a lot of those questions will be answered in the next agenda item, just in terms of how this all sort of dovetails together and kind of sets us on a good track moving forward. So if you're okay, I'll just hold your question until we go through the presentation, and you can ask at that point if I don't answer it in what I present in the BRE section.
Okay, that's fine. Yes.
Dan, a couple of things come to mind when I listen to the update and before we transition to the BRE. If we are planning on re-engaging that downtown group in late July, initial communications back out, should we be getting those out here mid-month? Give folks kind of a month to re-engage and get dates back on calendar. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the plan was to see if there's any kind of substantial changes to meeting size, in governor's, update that comes forward.
Yeah.
And then kind of once we start to get a little clearer picture of what that's gonna look like moving forward, is then get the meetings out. Because I mean, personally, I think those types of meetings are better done in person, but if we have to hold them remotely, we'll have to go through that. And I mean, planning exercises done through a remote meeting, they're tougher to start with, but you can do them. I mean, they're just a little bit clunkier than they are if everybody's in the same room.
Yeah, even just a quick communication on it's still on radar, we're still going to do this, I think would be good to get that, make sure that group is being held together. Even if we don't have a date on when we're actually going to be able to kick off, some sort of an interim communication here, I think would be good. We had a fairly sizable group prepared to get together. It'd be nice to keep them intact as much as possible. And then thinking about the downtown grants, and did I hear you right? We haven't had any applications for that?
Correct. There's been no applications as of today for that program.
Okay. And I don't know if there's been any thoughts with the group that's done Fireside Getaway. I don't know if there's any part of that project that would line up for eligibility. But they also may not be aware of the program. And so I'm not sure where the best outreach opportunity is, but I just think about, there's been a lot of work done to that building. Again, I'm not sure if there's a component that meets eligibility, but wouldn't want to miss that opportunity.
And just to update the EDA, I have had conversations with the owner of Fireside Getaway and regarding the program. Most of the work that they did was internal work, which is not eligible. But I did, let them know. I said, compile whatever you did on the exterior side, and we can take a look at it and see what's eligible for them. Okay. So they are keeping their receipts to see if they have any eligible components of the project.
Okay. That's good. And then I just applaud whatever we can do to stay in front of on the trade show speaking circuit. I think is also important to know it's on your radar. And I know, again, a lot of that's on hold, but if I'm starting to see a lot of virtual meetings in my world and conferences getting canceled and moved into an online format. So if there's an opportunity for us to stay in front of that, we should. So thanks for having that on your radar. And any other feedback related to the work plan before we move on to that broader BRE program conversation? Not hearing any. Let's transition then to our agenda item number 6, which is that BRE program. Dan, do you want to walk us through that as well?
Yeah, let me get this up. I have a screen share here, so hopefully I can get this to work.
A little bit of the genesis while you're teeing this up. There's, we talk a lot about BRE type activities, and certainly there's a fair amount of activity around the COVID response that is, BRE related, and kind of an opportunity to circle back on programs we have done in the past and a partnership that we had with the chamber. And I think the question is going to be whether there's elements of this that we would like to explore further and support at some additional level, and kind of looking back at what the past program is and how might we want to continue some of those activities, and how might we partner with the chamber again. So I think it's kind of a timely time to revisit what we've done in the past. Go ahead, Dan.
Is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I have here is just kind of an overview of what a business retention and expansion program, or BR&E programs, look like. The way this presentation is set up, I have a couple of points where I'll pull out of the stop sharing my screen. It's more of a conversation point, and I'll kind of go back into some discussion points. So it's going to be kind of a led conversation through a BR&E program. But just kind of wanted to start out, if I can figure out how to get to my next slide here. There we go. What a BR&E program is, a little bit of background for it. So you see here on the left-hand side, you see the 5 modules of the BR&E program. This is actually a graphic that was produced by Purdue University, which kind of gives the overview of how BR&E programs work. They have descriptors for each different section of them. But in essence, what a BR&E program does when it's up and running is it does serve as the foundation for economic development programs. So what you do is you go out and you collect survey data, you go out and meet with local businesses to try to really get that, what's the current environment like for the businesses? How can policymakers assist in some of the challenges that they're facing? Get an idea of if they're looking at expansion, if they're looking at if a business is coming into Forest Lake. You get some really good boots on the ground data. So that's sort of in that gather section, which is at the bottom of the screen there. Once that data comes back, then you really come back and you start to analyze that data and start to look for trends within the data. And then once that analyzation happens, you get a report, which then guides the policy, which can then start the process all over again. So you kind of are always with an up and running BR&E program, you always are going back to the local business community. You're establishing those relationships with the business community so you can really get a good idea of what challenges they're facing. An example of this would be, so for the downtown redevelopment grant that we did, had that been done in tandem with a good BR&E program, that program could potentially look a little bit different than it does now. It could look different in the fact that with a BR&E program, if the EDA was looking at launching a incentive program, you could go out to your business community, ask them, are you looking at doing any expansion efforts or refacing or any type of building efforts for your building in the next, say, 18 to 24 months? And if so, what level of investment are you planning? Are you planning 10,000, 20, 30, 40, or 50? And you can take those results back and you can really tailor that program to the feedback that you hear. And some of the feedback that I heard initially at that $50,000, kind of buy-in level for that program was it was too high for some local businesses. So you can start to tailor what policy comes out to really what the actual on-the-ground situation is with the local businesses. Now, when deploying a BR&E program, they kind of run the gamut in terms of varying levels of intensity. On one hand, what you have is you have a very intense program where you are establishing subcommittees of, like the EDA has a subcommittee dedicated to it. You have staff that's heavily dedicated to it. You bring in consultants to start working on some of the data collection, some of the data analysis as part of that. You typically will bring in a research partner from, say, the University of Minnesota to really kind of help guide the reporting and the policy development. These a fully executed BR&E program at that level of intensity is fairly resource intensive, it's fairly staff time intensive, and it's fairly EDA time intensive as well. That's on one hand. Those scale all the way back to sort of like a BR&E light program. Those can be as simple as you invite a local business in to an EDA meeting once a quarter and just ask them a series of questions, trying to get an idea of what they're doing in their business. So what you kind of see in BR&E programs, they sort of run the gamut in terms of varying levels of intensity. Now, that being said, back in 2011, the Forest Lake EDA did sponsor a very robust BR&E program. We partnered with Connexus Energy, Excel Energy, and the University of Minnesota to get that BR&E program launched. And included in your packet was sort of the summary work of what came out of that program. So you can see that one BR&E program launched quite a few sub-programs as a result of that. So one of the questions to ask at this point is why now? Why look at BR&E now? And I think that's a very fair question to ask, especially after, why wasn't this on the work plan, a while ago? Why are we talking about this now? And I think one of the main reasons it's here now is really due to the impacts of COVID-19. I'm on a lot of Zoom calls throughout the week with different economic development groups kind of throughout the state. And one of the trends that's happening right now is you are starting to see a lot of communities really start to dust off their BR&E programs and focus not so much on the expansion side of the coin, but really focusing on that retention side. They really want to get out there and look at what are the impacts that COVID's having on the local economy. Because I think it's pretty easy to see that, COVID is having an impact on local economy, the state economy, and the national economy. And a lot of these communities are looking at, if we dust off our BR&E programs and really focus on that retention side, we'll get a really good idea as to, what are the challenges that businesses are facing in, kind of a COVID, due to the new reality that COVID-19 is placing on local economies. It's also at a point in the year where we, as I've just gone through the work plan, some of those items that we really were focused on in 20 are sort of in a holding pattern. So there is a little bit of capacity right now to really get one of these programs up and running. And a BR&E program does transition and kind of work hand in glove with a lot of the downtown planning efforts. You look at a BR&E program, a lot of it's relation-based. It's relationships that the EDA has, that the chamber has with the local businesses, that's going to make the planning efforts that are planned for downtown more successful. Those businesses aren't going to view the EDA or somebody from the government more in an adversarial role. They're going to view it more as an ally and a partner. And a BR&E program really starts to help to establish that partnership. So I think one of the first discussion points for tonight, as I think is that first question is the EDA at this point interested in revolving a BR&E program? So I kind of looking for feedback from the EDA. Is this something that, the EDA wants to spend some time and resources on getting up and running again? So with that, I'd be happy to kind of pause the presentation and start looking for some EDA feedback on this one.
Well, I guess for one, I'm just not sure how you begin. I understand the proposition, but if it's going to be the more lean, locally driven or the consultant kind of variety, and where we have to pick it up is a matter of, I think, just saying, here's our starting point with BRE, how many assets and how many people and what can we really devote to it, and then deciding what it is, the process we're going to go through. So I'm just concerned about the start. I don't really kind of figure out how we start this game at this point.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, I think the starting point, that's sort of the next steps. I mean, I can work on getting that start, what the program looks like, really starting to get more of that, frame it in, get it, get the feedback from this group as to what they want the program to look like. Again, I don't want to put a program in front of the EDA that there's no desire from the EDA to really support or move forward with. So I think that's where we kind of are right now, where it's sort of first level question, is there interest? And even if one comes forward, really, is this something we want to focus our efforts on at this point while we're sort of in this, dealing with the response to COVID-19?
So if I can just kind of give my 2 cents on this, Judy and I that's how long her and I have been on this board. We were involved in that. She really was and did a great job. And it took a lot of time. It was a time-consuming project. We interviewed a number of businesses. A lot of people were involved. And it was a great program. We learned a lot. Like Dan said, a lot of different things came out of that whole process. And I don't know where it, both on, I'm as guilty as any on the time. It is a huge time commitment by the EDA. If we want to take this on, it's more than a couple meetings a month if we really want to do it right. And Judy was one of the people that just really led that charge and did a great job. So I think as a group, we need to decide first if that's something we want to take on. And secondly, I think part of the issue too is maybe the city staff wasn't in place to kind of continue that on and to go continue to find what we learned to make things better and make those changes that we found. So that, I think, the 2 first questions. I think as a group, we need to ask, and then if the city has the resources to continue to be involved in that.
So what I hear is some interest, but it's got to be appropriately scaled and appropriately resourced, right? To what we're able to commit to now. I think my own, so if I'm hearing that feedback right, I agree. And also would say that this can't be, maybe tease up some long-term program areas, but I think we're also should be shortcutting to look for some short-term wins or kind of what's needed in the near term, recognizing that's probably where there's more business need is in the near term. If we get, 12 months out from now, we've got just economic recovery naturally occurring. I think we're looking for what can we do in the front end to stimulate that even further. And so I'd be looking for some short-term wins rather than long-term program changes. But just thoughts on, I'm open to thoughts on that.
It seems like it's important at this moment in time to be really connecting with all of our local businesses on a real human scale. EDAs, there and participating and showing their involvement with local businesses. So the timing seems important to be doing something at this point in time if we could be.
If I could just offer one point of clarification on that, the programs that I've been hearing other cities kind of going back to are definitely leaning towards the more scaled back version. And two reasons for that is that realizing that right now a lot of businesses are focusing on recovery efforts, they're focusing on keeping their businesses going. I mean, they don't necessarily have time to sit down and answer a 50-point survey. I mean, they just don't have that capability at this point, and I don't blame them for that at all. So what you're seeing is a very scaled back survey questions. A couple of the examples I saw had maybe anywhere between 5 and 10 questions that were pretty easy questions to answer. So you're seeing them not necessarily jump into the full, let's go to that fully, really immersive, let's launch a lot of programs out of it. They're kind of doing this as, more of a, let's reach out to see what help we can kind of offer as sort of a gap fill until we kind of get and have a better or a clearer picture of what the actual long-term impacts of COVID are going to be. So I think to the point of where kind of some of the program design that I'm seeing out there in the market is that a lot of them are in that more scaled back version, which does allow, I think, for some easier wins versus trying to get hung up in this, trying to launch this big sort of behemoth of a project amidst the sort of a lot of other projects in the fire at the same time.
Would that take the form of a shotgun, small survey, clear and to the point, out to all the local businesses, or is it going to wait for some other kind of beginning point? I was just curious, that the survey idea done small and intimately without a lot of harassment and questions is a good direction to take, I think. The light level on it all sounds right while people transition. Do we do that just through a outreach program, through a mailing, through how would we begin something like that?
Typically these begin, the ones that I've seen is they actually begin with actual in-person. These are, you get better responses when you actually put a face to the name or you call the business up. I mean, remember back a few years ago, we did try a kind of a business visit program here at the EDA. We went through kind of a business list and kind of parsed them out. That is sort of an ongoing effort of a BR&E program. The one thing I will say that we didn't have a lot of participation at the EDA at that point. We kept it on as an agenda item for a number of months, and a lot of times it was, I couldn't get to it this week. And realizing that everybody leads busy lives. I mean, it's no fault of EDA members. It probably again wasn't a priority at that point. So in terms of how does the survey work, some of that is if there's commitment from EDA members that say do one business a month, you're going to get through that list quicker. If it's all on, either, staff or partnering with a partnering agency such as the chamber to kind of, work with them to contract with them to potentially do some of the survey work, that's going to give you a different level of response. So, I mean, ideally is that the EDA, the membership of the EDA would go out and do a certain number of visits on a monthly or every other month basis to get these questions done, because that's where that connection is. That's where you're going to really get that data, that good connection between the business and the governing body that you need for a successful BRNE program.
I like the personal.
Dan, maybe.
The personal.
Yeah, Dan, maybe let's.
Sorry.
Maybe with that first question answer, let's kind of go back into the meat of the presentation and more of kind of the follow-up, kind of the next steps, right?
Yeah, and I think I'm gonna try sharing my screen again. For some reason, I'm having a little bit of technical issues on my side. Let's see. So, oh no. Is everybody able to see discussion points continued, or?
Yes.
I can see it.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's, kind of where we're kind of looking at, is the scope of the project, and again, from a staff perspective, I mean, I think we're looking at more of that scaled back version. And again, these are sort of the guideposts in terms of guiding, as Commissioner Finneman kind of commented on, what does that start look like? That start's going to look like, look differently if we go through a full project versus a scaled back project. If I have, initial EDA involvement of saying, we can commit to one business visit a month or once a quarter, that's just going to guide some of those first guideposts as in terms of what we set up for, what does the program look like? I think it's very important to keep in the back of everybody's mind that the COVID-19 impacts of this, they can't be understated, just in the fact that what traditionally would probably be just a stop into a business after work or in the middle of the day may not be able to happen now, because that business may not want people coming in. They may want a Zoom call. They may want a phone call versus in person. So that could potentially slow down some of the business visits. But I think that just needs to be kind of in the back of everybody's mind as we started going through sort of this initial scoping. Another avenue to think about is the business sectors. Where do you want to focus efforts? You want to focus on retail, you want to focus on restaurants, manufacturing, service sector. Where do we kind of really want to put that brunt of our resources to start with, and then where do we want to expand out to? And also look for where are the project partners here. When we first did the BRNE program, the EDA actually contracted with the Chamber of Commerce to do some of the follow-up work, such as maintaining a business list, sort of starting some of that ongoing survey work. We actually had, we paid the Chamber of Commerce through a contract that we had to start that work. Is that something we want to take a look at again and start looking at other project partners to get this going? I've spoken with Chris at Washington County. He's been through a number of BRNE programs in the past and is willing to offer some of that technical advice that we may need to get some of that data analysis done. So I think as we start going through that, these are some of these starting questions that we want to at least look at. Then all of these will be rolled up, and then at the next, the next EDA meeting, more of a concrete work plan would bring brought forward. I mean, again, bear in mind, we are at the ground level of this one. This is where everything is malleable. This is where, nothing is concrete at this point. So this is a very malleable and moldable project moving forward, making sure that it fits the goals of the EDA as well as the resources and time that we can devote to this project. So with that, kind of focusing on these discussion points, I'll kind of turn it back to the group just to sort of look for some feedback as to, what the EDA thinks towards these discussion points.
So as a new kid on the block, my first initial reaction was, yeah, this sounds fun or good, or we should do it. But I remember when you guys did it in 2011, because I think Judy was trying to recruit me to be a part of it. And life was too busy at that time. So, but I do remember it happening. As I'm looking through the objectives on the reason for this program, to demonstrate support, to help solve immediate concerns, increase local business ability, so on and so forth. This is being referred to as a project. I mean, how often are cities our size, doing this as a project versus an ongoing, are we just dusting this off because we may have time, or is it something that should be done every 5 years, or is it an ongoing thing? What does that help me understand how that fits in, if I'm making any sense?
I think in an ideal world, this stays as an ongoing project. I've talked to some other cities that are sort of kind of gone through the resurgence of their BR&E programs, and a lot of times what the limiting factor is EDA participation. If participation dries up, that's going to drive how far you can go with these programs. And secondly is, it's no secret that a lot of times if you have a fully resourced BR&E program, they do generate a lot of work for staff. And a lot of it's going to be on staff. How much staff capacity do you have to get these programs in place and constantly monitored and adjusted? So, but the lighter versions, the kind of what's being presented here, where you just are starting out, a lot of times these sort of go through, there's a big push at the beginning for the big robust program, which we did 10 years ago, or in 2011. And then you sort of see this lighter version kind of continue on as an ongoing project, long term.
So were the objectives of the 2011 major project met?
I would say that parts of them were. I'd have to go through line by line to see actually what objectives were, obtained. I know a few of them, had started. There was a lot of kind of momentum behind them. The partnerships were there. Like I mentioned with the chamber, we had them. The chamber was managing a business list. There was some ongoing efforts, and then it just sort of fizzled out. And I don't really see anything that it was a performance issue on anybody's part. I just think there was sort of a refocusing of efforts that took place at the EDA level. And the program, in my estimation, just sort of fizzled out. I think this is sort of kind of a resurgence of that, or kind of like, let's, bring this back to the forefront, and see what we can do to redevelop this moving forward.
Well, I think this is a perfect time to be revisiting this, because I think programs like this often they lose their steam. It was a great beginning to communication with our businesses. It was, I think, very well received by the businesses that we went in personally and visited with. And it was the beginning of just, I think, a much better relationship between the city and businesses. And I think it's a perfect time to have sort of a focused lower level. Like you said, Dan, you don't want to go in. That survey that you had us do was kind of ridiculously long. And if business owners you start the conversation and they will share with you what they want to share, which is what we really hear. But I think that it is just such a good communication thing. And when somebody from the EDA or from the city council or from the administration stops in and says, "Hi, I am so-and-so and I just want to see how you're doing," or start out asking some questions, it was just really well received. And we did come out with some outcomes then that we focused on. And Blake, you can help me out here. The beautification of Highway 61 was definitely one of them. The workforce, nothing really brand new. A lot of what we have in our goals right now are still stemming, I think, from the BR&E back in 2011.
I would agree with you, Judy, and I think that that was the first time the city probably had ever really reached out to the businesses like that, and people appreciated that. The other thing that I think if we were to go forward and if we were all willing to commit to one business a month or whatever that is, I think having a much stronger leadership at the council or at the chamber level with Nanette there, I think would make it even that much stronger. Not trying to volunteer.
Yeah, I agree. I think
not trying to volunteer for any more, Nanette, but just your leadership.
Well, but I think Nanette has she's done a great beginning, and it's one thing, for the chamber, because that's what, the chamber focus is, but it is also what our focus should be. And the retention right now is huge. And if we can reach out and just ask those questions, whether it ends up with great end results or not, they feel like they were heard. And I remember one of the things that I followed up with one of my businesses, and he just wanted the boulevard out in front of his business mode. I mean, it was as simple as that. And he was happy and just, he felt valued. And I think that's what we need right now, is we need to make our small business owners feel valued.
Yeah, I think personally, I think it was a great program, and we participated in it back then, and it did give you a voice, and from anything from like what you just mentioned, the cutting weeds to whatever, plowing snow or
Weeds in your parking lot.
exactly, yeah, exactly. So Judy, I really agree with all you just said about all that, and you know, 10 questionnaire thing and just stopping it. I don't think that'd be that bit of a issue with people, and I think they would welcome it back. I really do. And if I can, something I can do to help out with that, I'd be willing to do that. So.
Great feedback. Dan, other kind of next step items or questions for this group, or do you have kind of the feedback that you need to kind of bring this back with, here's what a BRNE program might look like?
Yeah, I think I have enough to kind of start to get the rough plan together, you know, look at collecting some of those example survey questions. I mean, I think what I'm kind of hearing here is there's a desire for a scaled back version. So I'll kind of bring together at the next meeting some potential survey questions that are in line with that more scaled back version. Take a look at a deployment plan, set some metrics up saying we're going to try to hit one business a month. What does that look like for the next 3 months? And start looking at just sort of framing out what an onset of a BRNE program looks like. I have, like I mentioned, spoken with Chris. He said he is willing to assist in any way that he can from his technical expertise side. And there also has been some initial conversations with the chamber about looking at reestablishing that partnership that we had with them to when we were, as a result of the initial BRNE program, they looked at a business city partnership for economic prosperity as one of their action items. That was led by the chamber. That is where we contracted with the chamber to do that. I did talk to Nan about the possibility of, you know, re-engaging that partnership level at some point or some way, shape, or form. There was interest there. I mean, obviously we have to go through the details and bring together more of a detailed plan at the next meeting, but I have to go on to bring all that back at a future meeting for more of a, you know, what does this look like? You know, what's the start look like, to Commissioner Finneman's point, and I'll be able to bring that to the next meeting.
Dan, can you check your participant panel? Nan got booted out, or her connection dropped, said she's trying to get back in.
I am not seeing her try to get back in.
I'll just tell her we signed her up for all of the things.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Judy, did you have something?
Yeah, so, you know, if, as you pursue this, if we wait and do not start this until like September, that will give these businesses a minute to get back, you know, to adjust whatever is kind of their new normal. And, you know, hopefully by September, they're going to know more of their needs and concerns than they will know right now, because everything is just too many moving parts right now. And so to maybe give them a little bit of time to, you know, kind of get back to business, and we might be more welcomed, and they might have more information for us if we wait a few months.
Feedback from others on starting on timing. Blake, as you know, business owner in the community and with people you know, does that sound like a good start time?
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. That does make a lot of sense. Just the fact that, as Judy mentioned, just in summer in itself, it's tough to catch people, but on top of what's going on here, I think gives us a couple months to really feel like where are we going to be with this? The economy going to continue to be okay despite what's going on, or is it going to hit, you know, go in the tank, or is the stocks going to continue to slowly go back on the rise? So yeah.
Right.
So you think about, I still haven't learned how to dive in. So you think about maybe August or September, let things settle a bit, get more known, and then begin a process like we've talked about. I'm sure we can still sound like we're empathetic for they're going through the transition, even though we're coming in a little later.
Yeah, I think so. And I think I would like this group between now, I'd like us to hit the ground running in September. So this group between now and September, you know, getting a program outlined, getting some, you know, names dedicated to who's reaching out to what, and so that we're hitting the ground running with those contacts in September, rather than kind of picking up planning in September again. Okay. I'm not sure we're gonna get Nan back on here. Dan, can you circle back with her on other, as you're thinking about next steps, can you collaborate with her on role and how we might continue to that partnership with the chamber?
Absolutely, yep. I will circle back with her.
Okay. Anything else related to the BRD conversation?
Is there a way that that, I don't know, maybe Nanette has a good pulse on this, of businesses in town that are really at risk as far as making it through COVID, and you know, if there's something that we can specifically do for really at-risk businesses?
You know, I don't want to speak for her in terms of what, you know, she knows. I mean, I know she's got a pretty good pulse on, you know, the business community here. You know, and I think if you look at, you know, kind of a short-term gap fill, there's, you know, there is a part of BRD program where it's the red flag section, where if there's something that's flagging, you know, like an immediate concern, you know, for a business, I think we could, you know, potentially start maybe on some red flag, you know, efforts right out of the gate, to your point, where if there's somebody who's, you know, in dire need of some assistance or resources or whatever that is, get those identified early on. So maybe we could use that as sort of a start in before we go with the full BRD. But I'll circle back with Annette and see if she knows of anybody that comes to mind.
There she is. Just in time. Is your audio working? Are you okay?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
You're back. Yep. We
Sorry
signed you
about
up for all of the things.
that.
Just
Okay.
kidding. No. You missed very little. You missed very little. Well, Dan will circle back with you offline on kind of what the next steps look like for a light program. And we would be looking at planning between now and September, and trying to aim for kickoff for the kind of program start in September.
Okay. Great. That'll be great, Dan, because I'll be meeting with my executive committee and our board, so that would be good. Where are you, Dan? Thank you. Are you ready for me to give you an update? Is that where we're at?
Actually, it's great. Your timing is perfect, because yes, we are ready to transition to a chamber update.
Great. I wasn't sure if you were ready to adjourn or where you were at as I scrambled to relaunch my internet. Not sure what happened. So I had a couple of things that I wanted to share with you, Mayor Bain and the EDA. We have started to schedule grand reopening sessions where we'll have a small group of individuals go out to businesses and perform ribbon cuttings. And so we actually have 4 of them this Thursday. We're focusing on the restaurants. We have 3 restaurants on Thursday evening, plus a realtor that we're going to go to an actual home. So we're doing those at 3, 3:20, 3:40, and 4 o'clock on Thursday. Sounds like we'll probably throw in another one. Found out that Music Connection is opening fully on Wednesday. So I'd like to go and do that for them on Wednesday. So that's exciting. That's right. That's good momentum stuff. That's pictures and videos. And so we're really happy to be able to just, even if it's 5-10 minutes at a business to recognize the fact that they're opening, we're going to do that. And so we'll be participating. It'll be myself and our ambassador team. And then second, we released late last week, we released some posters that just, I really took a look at what was, what the recommendations for opening were. The Minnesota Chamber came out with a poster. I kind of liked it. I kind of didn't. I felt like it was missing a couple of the factors that were on the list from the state, from the governor's office. So I added a few things, and it's so we created some artwork, and that's free and available to any business to post, so that really any one of us that walk up to a business know, hey, they've taken some time, they've given it some consideration. And so it says open for business, and then it's got some graphics of all the different things. So that's available currently. And so if you know anybody that's looking for that, let me know, and I will gladly share that with them. And then on the course of continuing to do our business development, today we talked heavily around recovery and what businesses were doing and what they were struggling with. We have a joint effort on the 17th, so June 17th, Wednesday at noon. Tyler Hilzeback will be doing a presentation for our Washington County chambers on Zoom. And the last time we had a group together this way, we had 100 people participate. So we're excited about that. This one's going to be on cash flow and break even point. So good topic matter at this point as people are considering their openings. And then we do have another speaker on the 30th of this month. And that one is focused around leadership in troubled times. And again, anyone is welcome to attend either one of these events. And then lastly, I wanted to share, since Chris is not on with us tonight, we have Washington County's been working on this business to business grant program for small businesses to kind of fill in the gap around folks that maybe did not receive PPP or the SBA loan. And there's also some actual hands-on partnership with this program as well that I think Chris mentioned the last time that we met. He informed me today that that's going to be ready to go tomorrow. So my office will be sending out an announcement as soon as I have the details from Chris on that. So that's what I have for you tonight. Any questions?
Thanks, Nan. Any questions for Nan this evening? Great update. We don't have Chris on for a Washington County update. I know Nan touched on a couple of those topics, and ongoing thanks to the Washington County team for the continued partnership on the Open to Business program and everything that they're bringing to the table during this time. So they continue to be great partners for us. We have a few minutes here before we need to adjourn. Just pause and see if there is anything further that this group has for this evening.
If I can just follow up back on the conversation that we started with on what the patio situation. So I had, while we were on here, I text Alex, who owns Big Apple, and I had noticed he's in our building, noticed there were some blue barrels out in front, and I saw him today, but forgot to ask him about it. And it sounds like the city had brought them over to probably define that parking, that patio space, so it's not in a parking lot. So I don't know who took the lead there, but that's a great thing to see that the city took the initiative to try to help a local business and try to define that space and make it safe for everyone.
Yeah, we ordered those once the governor allowed the patio seating, because we were concerned about those businesses that needed to have a safer perimeter. Some are better than others, and the blue barrels full of water will keep most cars from driving through any dining area. So the city supplied those, and we'll offer them to any business that still may need them.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. Anything else? Anything further this evening? Not hearing any, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I
move to
the
adjourn.
motion, we adjourn.
We have a motion, and it sounds like we've also got a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we will be adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.